morning, everyone. I see loads of people joining. I'm just going to give you all a couple of minutes to join. I hope you're all enjoying this beautiful sunshine. It's about time. There we go. Fantastic. Lots of people joining today. Fantastic. Great to have so many of you here today. Really excited to be putting on this event today, and glad that so many of you could join us. Just so you know, we've had a couple of events over the last couple of weeks. So if you've missed out on them, please check on our website. There's recordings up. We've launched our two big pieces of research in the last few weeks, one on the trends in corporate reporting of the FTSE 100, and one's on the trends in corporate websites on, again, the FTSE 100. So really excited to share those with you. So today, actually, we're going to move beyond that, move beyond the actual reporting research, and we're going to deep dive into something that our clients are talking about with us every day. And that's really this challenge of disclosure or communications. Okay, so that's what we're going to do today. And just by way of introduction, I'm Sally Pilot, the Chief Insight and Engagement Officer at Black Sun. Really excited to be here, being with Black Sun for a very long time, and I drive a lot of our external engagement and our thought leadership. And co-hosting the webinar today, I have Anne Kirkby.
Hi, I'm Anne. Well, I'm Investor and ESG Communications Director at Black Sun. Been with Black Sun the last 6 years, and prior to that, I spent a decade in the city as an ESG analyst. We help clients with, helping them to ensure that they disclose what they need to be doing, need to be disclosing, prioritizing the right way, and communicating their holistic story. Leighton?
And good morning, I'm Leighton. I'm Sustainability Communications Director. I've been working in sustainability or previous versions of sustainability for about 24 years. It's really all I've ever done. I spent about half of that working for multinational corporations in the UK and Switzerland, so client side. The other half I've spent in more technical consultancies and strategic communications agencies. I spend a lot of my time helping companies tell their sustainability story, which I'll be coming on to in this presentation.
Super. Thanks, Anne. Thanks, Leighton. So the way I put it is Anne's going to talk to us about facts and Leighton's going to talk to us about feelings. I can see how they'll respond to that with their presentations. So just a little bit about us before we kick off. Just for those of you that don't know us, we're a stakeholder communications company. Our purpose is really to help bring the corporate story to life. For more than 27 years, we've existed to help companies solve their critical business challenges through creative communication services and solutions. You can see the range of services that we offer, from consultancy, which provides insight and knowledge to our clients through benchmarking, materiality assessment, stakeholder engagement, through to communication strategy and frameworks, through to sustainability and digital, okay? Just enough about us, but we are privileged, and I wanted to mention it because I know a lot of you are on the phone, and apologies, I couldn't put everybody's logo up there, but we're privileged to work with really ambitious companies who see the powerful role that communications can play in inspiring and engaging their stakeholders. And it's great to see so many of you engage with us today, as always. So just a little bit more background in terms of our approach, and I thought this was worth sharing because we do have a very focused approach at Black Sun. Our Horizon Series research, we're very focused on research and thought leadership to understand how changing behavior, increasing transparency, and improving engagement between businesses and key stakeholders is changing. We've been doing this for 16 years. Originally, it started looking at the corporate reports. Over that time, our research has evolved significantly and expanded into the role of strategic storytelling, and that role that storytelling plays in helping organizations around the world really build that vital trust and communicate their value creation story across multiple channels. So our research looks at whether we're capturing the spirit of regulation, whether we're creating corporate websites which reinforce purpose, or whether we're engaging with wider stakeholders on sustainability. So that's what we do in terms of the research. So we're also really excited to get back to normal sometime. As you will well know from the past, we do a lot of these events live. I can't wait for the time where we get you in a table, in a room, and we can have table discussions again and talk about this stuff. face to face. So I'm hoping by September, fingers crossed, now that we've got our freedom back, that we'll be able to start doing that. So watch this space for future events. So enough about us. I just wanted to set the scene before we get into it. As you all well know, I don't think I need to remind anyone just how much the world has changed over the last 12 to 18 months and what that's meant for business. And I use this expression a lot, but I love that saying where there are decades where nothing happens and there are weeks when decades happen. And I really feel that that's where we're going in this space, particularly around the focus on standardizing and mandating ESG reporting, or that alphabet soup, as it's often referred to. There's been a lot greater focus on the enforcement of ESG. There's been a lot of stakeholder activism. It's being pushed up onto the board agendas of almost every client that we work with, which I think is a really exciting opportunity. And it's being driven increasingly by investors. Increasingly, we hear, facts and figures come out about the trillions of dollars being invested in companies that have a good ESG track record. So I think it's something that can't be avoided at this stage. As you will well know as well, there's a huge push for convergence of ESG standards, the voluntary standard setters working together. Recently, we had the merger of SASB and IIRC to form the Value Reporting Foundation, which I think is a big step forward, and I'm excited about this convergence. We also had WEF earlier in the year with the IBC and the Big Four joining forces to produce a set of stakeholder capitalism metrics. So there's lots of convergence going on here. And at the same time, we've had ESG focus regulations changing really quickly, and that pace globally is really accelerating. So I just wanted to top line a couple of those things that are happening that you'll probably be well aware of, but just to top line them from around the world. So IFRS, very conscious for the need for a global comparative set of sustainability related disclosures. And the good news in that, I think, is they're very focused on what is already out there and taking a building blocks approach. And they've had a lot of endorsement and support from bodies like IOSCO and the FRC and many around the world. So I think that's really positive. In Europe, they're very focused on as well improving the quality of corporate disclosure. And as you will well know, it's a key element of the EU sustainability finance strategy in support of the EU transition towards climate neutrality. So there's a lot of focus on that. The EU is also updating the NFRD, so the non-financial reporting directive, with the CSRD. And creating a set of standards to underpin that. And there are a lot of new initiatives in that, such as mandatory assurance, that we might pick up on throughout this conversation. And just in case you didn't notice, the SEC is also coming to the party with more ESG reporting in the fall. So look, it's exciting that around the world this is all happening, and signals, as far as I can see, is that these international initiatives are really trying to work together in more of a coordinated fashion to ensure that there's a global baseline driven by by IFRS, but that the other initiatives fit together in line. And in the UK, the FRC has been very focused at moving on this over the last year, with both TCFD and encouraging companies to move forward on using SASB metrics. And recently, at the beginning of July, published a statement of intent on ESG, so environmental, social, and governance challenges. And they state in that, we support the movement towards global standards and alignment of non-financial reporting. They very much welcome the activity of the IFRS Foundation trustees to set up this idea of an international sustainability standards board. But interestingly, and I think importantly for all of you on the line, they also state that they consider reporting for wider stakeholders is necessary at a domestic level. Okay, and I think that's really critical. And in their accompanying report, they go on to say, our work will address the full range of ESG issues beyond climate change. A future corporate reporting model should accommodate the interests of wider stakeholders as well as investors, including reporting on companies' wider impacts. Okay, so this is here to stay, and we firmly believe getting ahead of this curve is really important for clients. So that's what I wanted to do in terms of scene setting. I'm now going to hand it over to Leighton. That's going to give us a little bit of an update of what he's seen over the 20 years of his being in this market and how much it's changed.
Yeah, thank you, Sally. So as I mentioned, when I started out doing sustainability, or whatever it was called back then, we really didn't talk about an awful lot. We reported on CO2 in an annual report, an environmental report, but it hadn't been long since we realized the world was actually getting warmer and not colder, as science had thought. Not too long before then, there was a new freezing coming. We also used to disclose on a little bit of HR, but usually that was self-promoting, the number of people we hired, how big a company we were. It wasn't really looking at diversity or tackling issues. Health and safety had always been a very strong issue that particularly industrial companies had reported well on. And then again, that sort of self-congratulatory donations to charities were the other things. That was pretty much what my job entailed. And a lot of this was done voluntarily. It was for PR purposes that we were communicating the good we were doing. Slide, please. If we move forward to now, these are just the statutory requirements for sustainability reporting, and they're not even all of them. They're the first 10 or 12 I could think of putting this slide together. Most people on this call will be more than aware of just how much statutory regulatory reporting there is out there that companies must disclose on. If I had to build a slide of the things that people should disclose on and are disclosing on, I wouldn't fit them all on here. So it's been a huge shift in the landscape of what needs to be communicated. There's a lot of hope that legislation is driving things in the right direction, and it's actually encouraging companies to act better as well as just ticking boxes. We'll come on to that a bit later when Anne talks. If we can move a slide, please. So likewise, back then, the GRI was founded in 1997. It's really started in 2000 with its first standards. And that at the time was welcomed as being a way that companies could start to standardize their sustainability reporting. Roll forward to today and look at the number of frameworks and benchmarks and indices. Is quite the opposite. There is a real proliferation of reporting standards and frameworks that actually exasperate people and depress people. And I'm sure a lot of people on this call spend too much of their time trying to report to all these different groups and wish there were fewer. There's continually conversation about convergence and conflation of these standards, and some are merging together. But for every one that merges, another one seems to appear with every blink of the eye. So the hope is ultimately there will be a standardization of all this reporting, but they've been saying that for 10 or 15 years, and all we've seen is growth in them. Onto a slide, please. In addition to the legislative requirements, there's also been a huge shift in people, whether that's people as employees or potential employees or consumers of goods. We've shifted from that baby boomer era of people who are just happy to have a job, who will work anywhere, who will buy what's cheap and be happy to have something, shifting through to Gen X and millennials, where they've become a bit more discerning about where they work and the goods and services they buy, through to Generation Z, who now is quite activist about things. And it's not only that they're making choices, they're very, very vocal about things they don't like, and they will run to social media and make their voice heard. And then Generation Alpha, I hadn't even heard of that generation until last year, discussing with a supermarket client who said they're very concerned about Generation Alpha because the kids now are nagging their parents about their shopping purchases. 8-year-olds telling their parents they'll only eat line caught tuna and they won't eat anything with palm oil in it. So 5 or 6-year-olds now are even having a huge impact on supermarkets' comm strategies. Frighteningly as well, alphas, I think, refer to anyone born since 2000, which means they're now not only in the workforce, but they are now graduates. If that doesn't make you feel old, I don't know what will. On a slide, please, Anne. So legislation, we talked about a little bit about the changing people out there. And then what on earth do you say in this ever-increasing world? Most people here will be familiar with materiality assessments. They'll have seen lots of these very complicated matrices on the left. Ultimately, materiality is about talking, disclosing and communicating on the issues that are most important to your company, your business strategy, and your stakeholders. It's a very important part of disclosure. SASB, GRI, a lot of the frameworks and standards require that you have a robust materiality process. The idea is they want to avoid you cherry picking issues that you're very good at or that is very easy to report on. And they really want to ensure you are disclosing and having a conversation on issues that mean a lot to the world and to your stakeholders. So we do.
Can I just jump in for a second there? Because the question that we often get from clients is, how often should we do these materiality assessments? Is it a once a year thing, or what's your recommendation on that?
So we typically, I mean, good practice says every other year to do a full assessment, while using the intervening year to recalibrate a little bit. But in the COVID world, in the world where climate change grows and it's growing so quickly and changing and legislation's introducing, we're seeing most companies doing some form of materiality assessment every year, but ideally every other year with a recalibration in the middle. So just a little bit on what we do with clients. We do a number of these every year, and they really do vary. We do quite light touch exercises, more for companies who really want to tick the box and have something to say in their annual or sustainability reports that they've done the assessment and try and score a few points with the raters. But desk research is really looking at what has been communicated by the company itself or by other commentators, looking at peers. Also, we do quite a lot of digital and social media listening to see what the whole world is saying about companies, especially those who have a bit more of a B2C brand presence. So the desk research gets you so far, and for many companies that's enough. But really the best way to learn what your stakeholders expect of you is to go out and ask them, as simple as that may seem. Surveys are a really effective way of doing this to get a quantitative approach, get a large number of different stakeholders' views with a little bit of qualitative interpretation in the comments they give. Interviews are a great way to pick very important stakeholders and understand not only the issues that they believe are important. So it's not just saying, do you think waste is important, water, diversity? It's also understanding what they expect the company to be doing, how they're communicating, whether they're setting ambitious enough targets, whether their programs are sufficient. You get that more granular insightful piece of feedback. And then focus groups are a way to actually encourage clients, groups of people, particularly within the client employee groups often, to have a conversation with one another and listen in on a conversation of people discussing sustainability within the business. So hopefully materiality assessments are useful, valuable tools that give you insight. For about half our clients, I think, being honest, they're more a reporting tick box exercise. They need to do them. But fortunately for the other half, we get to work on turning that into more of a strategic outcome and looking at how the business should be adapting based on what we find as a result of this insight and research. So a bit about materiality there and why that's important and how much that is growing in the marketplace. Slide, please. So that's all the bad news. There's an awful lot going on. It's not getting any easier to communicate. There's more and more stakeholders getting involved and legislation is growing. So yeah, that's the challenge to everybody. What we've learned at Blackstone as a result of doing an awful lot of stakeholder engagement, a lot of research and working with a lot of companies is really there's two main groupings of audiences, sort of two personas of how people consume information. So we've got our data and policy focused types. So these are the ESG analysts, the investors, material issue specific NGOs, and sometimes B2B customers. These guys want lots of data. They want the hard, dry facts. They want a bit about your strategy. They want all your policies, all your methodologies. They're not too interested in the nicely curated narrative. They don't want the stories. They're not interested in the £100 you raise in a bake sale through an employee bake-off. That's not what these guys are after. They're often not real people. They're often AI machine readers like Sustainalytics or MSCI that are taking information, so they appreciate as fewer infographics and images as possible, and prefer to have tables and data. And these are still very much preferred in PDF report format or spreadsheet format. They're still very much time-based. They're usually a one-year period. Last year, it's last year's sustainability report or a fact sheet for last year. It's a numbers game, and it's conveying to people the data behind things. So that's one set of stakeholders and audiences and their personas. The other side, the side I find a bit more interesting and work a lot more on, is the storytelling, as Sally said, the feelings part. These are your employees, your consumers, the public, your suppliers, and again, your B2B customers also. But they want the rich story. They want to understand what you're doing and the impact that has in society, the lives you're changing. They're very interested in and very susceptible to key messages and slick narratives that bring them in. They need to be supported by proof points. So it isn't all about the claims of yesteryear of sustainability is our #1 priority and people are the heart of our business. You can no longer just make these rather open claims without supporting it with numbers, but fundamentally it's the message and narrative that these people buy into. And the formats for these are the more modern social media, digital media, and quick, short, pithy flyers that get information over. And on a slide, please. And the annual report, so we get to do a lot of annual reports for a lot of very big companies here. And for us, this is the point where the two meet each other. The annual report, and particularly the strategic report, is the part where the story does overlay onto the numbers and figures and policies, but it still does it through the lens of materiality. The FRC talks very much about materiality, conciseness being important parts of what makes a good report. So it's about telling the key part of the story and then using your other channels like the website and sustainability reports, shorter reports, to direct people to. So Anne's going to talk a little bit more about reporting and how you get some of this information conveyed.
Cool. Okay. So Leighton sort of set out the scene for you there a little bit. You know, we have the disclosure part and we have the communication part. And obviously it's still the same story, but it's just, you know, looking at those particular stakeholders, making sure that you know their needs, making sure you know the right formats for them, making sure that you prioritize things right. Now, we've already seen the alphabet soup a little bit in one of Leighton's slides, but I just wanted to remind you again, you know, we're looking at a lot of different things here, and this is only the top of the iceberg, really. You know, sort of divided them in here by your reporting frameworks. You know, really the how. Your transparency initiatives, which is always tend to be focused on a particular issue, one issue. The what to put in it almost sometimes. The ratings agencies, so whether you want it or not, you'll be rated by ratings agencies, looking at your, you know, using their own methodology to determine what you should be disclosing and rating you based on that. I've also put in credit rating agencies because they increasingly are incorporating ESG analysis as part of the credit ratings. I know from Fitch that they say under 5%, something like 4.7% of the current credit ratings are actually impacted by ESG disclosures. But it is part of the narrative, and as their methodology sort of strengthens, I think it's likely that might increase substantially. We've got obviously the indices. And I should say, obviously, there's a lot of consolidation in this industry at the moment, a lot of consolidation. So we have, for instance, Moody's own VE. So they own a ratings agency. So that means that the research from there goes into the credit rating agencies' ratings. We have a number of S&P, for instance, own SAM. Which means that the data that goes submitted into Dow Jones Sustainability Indice is part of S&P's data source as well. So there's a lot of overlap, and obviously a lot of overlap between the ratings agencies and the indices, because the indices tend to be built on the data that comes through in the rating agencies. Finally, the last group we have is the artificial intelligence data providers, which is sort of the data scrapers that Leighton was talking about a little bit earlier. Very difficult to control because they will pick up just about anything. They will scrape the internet for anything to do with you as a company. So it might be everything from the number of patents you've filed, or you know, conferences that someone's attended, or you know, there's no limit to the amount of data that they might scrape and then compile it back to investors who might then buy a feed. They can be able to drill down into this feed to see exactly where does the source come from, what is the source telling me, etc. So again, very difficult to control, whereas some of the other ones, you know, voluntary, non-voluntary, easier to control. I'll come back to that in a little bit later, how you can deal with these. But I thought it'd be interesting to just start by sort of looking at what are what we need to be thinking about when we start this process, right? What does the different stakeholders expect of you? Should you take that story and cut it in different lenses for different stakeholder groups, or should you rely on one materiality lens for all stakeholder groups? Going back to that, is it a communication opportunity or is it a disclosure exercise? So for each of these, look at them saying, what are we trying to achieve here? Are we trying to communicate something, or are we trying to disclose something? Because the approach is entirely different, and the format that you need to do it in is entirely different. Don't waste your time communicating data if the audience for it is not looking for communication. What's the right format? Right? Is there, do we need to have just a data sheet with the data for those who need that, and actually not deal more with that? Do we need to have a short communication document that actually tells a sort of a more emotive story that isn't necessarily underpinned by a lot of data, performance, etc.? And should we prioritize all stakeholder groups equally? Are there some that we say, well, actually, we're going to focus on these in year 1, these in year 2, or these in year 6? So a number of questions that we need to be starting to think about before we even attack this.
Just a quick question for you, and I was going to ask, maybe you could just share a little bit about how we're seeing companies organize themselves internally to have those discussions, because you're touching a lot of different stakeholder groups would fit into lots of different people's remits. That might be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting question, because I think and I always get into sort of trouble when I say this. It's a little bit controversial, but I would say ESG is wider than sustainability, and people always go, no, this and this curriculum says so and so, but I always see ESG touching so many different topics that go beyond. So if you look at functions within a company, sustainability tends to sit within sustainability, funnily enough. ESG, yes, covers sustainability function within a company, but it also covers the risk function. It also covers the governance and company secretariat. It also covers product development. If we're talking about products with in-use sustainability capabilities, etc. It also touches compliance team. It also touches perhaps data security, all of those sort of things. So it's very wide, and sometimes I think companies tend to put the responsibility in the bucket of the sustainability team and say, well, you figure out what we need to be doing. And actually, the conversation is much broader than that. You need to bring in all of those different functions within the company, depending on the nature of your company and what's most material to you and all of those sort of things. But and I think that's sometimes where the story becomes a little bit one-sided, and also not entirely fair to the sustainability team to be dealing with things, and we do sometimes come up with in that, even with say the HR team and sustainability team, who's responsible for what sits within the sustainability strategy, what sits outside, what's a separate people strategy, etc. So that working relationship and having a cross-function working group, I think, is really key.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
I thought it'd also be helpful to just dive in a little bit more in each of those stakeholder groups. So you'll see from that slide Leighton had, where he sort of structured by the disclosure and communication, sort of who the audiences are for that. I'm sort of have the same audiences here for the disclosure part, and sort of setting out a little bit on what are the different needs. And I think investors come in many shapes and sizes. You have your total mainstream investor and you have your ESG investor, but I think most of them look at this from a sort of a business resilience perspective. I mean, that's really fundamentally what they're about, right? That's why they look at ESG in the first place. It's about business resilience and resilience in the long term. So they, on one hand, want a little bit of the sort of holistic story. They want to see how it all sort of fits together. They want also evidence that what the company is talking about is material. Are they focusing on the right things? They want the accountability element of it. That you set targets, that you report back on those targets, etc. They want to have more insight into not just your sort of PLC footprint, but also, to the degree possible, obviously, the handprint. So that's sort of a terminology that particularly one of our clients use at the moment, which I think is really interesting. Your handprint is really your products in use. So if you're a technology company, that's sort of clean tech, green tech, that sort of thing, or the benefits to your clients of using their products or having you as a supplier. So greening their supply chain, for instance. They want to see, because that's obviously competitive advantage. So that's why investors are interested in that. They also want easy, accessible data because they tend to have their own proprietary systems. So they might take research from a number of raters and combine it with research from, say, a data scraper or artificial intelligence provider. They might then also add to that their own engagement efforts and their own research efforts, and then they might then, out of that, score companies in their own scoring. So therefore, companies shouldn't necessarily always be so worried about rankers and rated scorings, because unless they are in the bottom, the data is really what's key for investors by and large. So the data that you disclose rather than necessarily the scoring. Because they have their own proprietary systems. So the formats for them is actually a little bit of a mix of everything. So they want the annual report to ensure that sustainability is integrated into the business, that it's part of the thinking in every process. They want to see the sustainability report. They want to use it to sort of see how things fit together. They want the context and the kind of element that you can't have in an annual report because it just becomes too unbalanced. And they also want the data. So they want a little bit of everything. Whereas some of the other ones, rating agencies, for instance, it's the focus really here is around policies and application, easy access to information, that you disclose a very granular level of detail on some of these issues. And sometimes, a granular level that companies aren't necessarily thinking is material, perhaps, or you want to see how policy is applied geographically, how it's applied throughout the organization, and they want to see data on this. So very, very granular. That doesn't work well in a communication format. So that's where we're looking at data sheets, fact sheets, and a website depository. And I've got examples of these later on, so you'll be able to see. NGOs tend to be single topic issues they're focusing on, and they tend to have more of a sort of leeway in terms of, disclosure around planning for future action. So we are currently doing this, we intend to do this. There's some more flexibility there. So actually, there's I think in the UK compared to perhaps continental Europe, there's a tendency to perhaps only report on the stuff that you've done rather than saying the stuff that we will do, because what happens if we don't do it in the end? But, whether it's NGOs or indeed investors, they tend to have, there's typically a good reason why you don't do something. So put it out there, tell us what that future plan is. Again, for NGOs, fact sheets, website depositories, where you have all of this detail that isn't necessarily something that needs to be communicated in a very easily findable place. Findable, is that a word? And regulators is similar, right? It's formats for them are typically the annual report, the website, and it's obviously they'll be looking at compliance, stakeholder protections, and industry initiatives. Now, I thought I'd go through a little bit around some of the different formats. So we often get asked about annual report versus sustainability report. And I think it's interesting to sort of look at how that journey has evolved over even sort of the last 7-8 years in terms of the role of the different reports. So the annual report used to be, obviously it would have the CO2 data because that was mandatory, and then not a lot else, a people section perhaps, but it was very short. And then obviously with all the regulation that came in, that report became, more sustainability, depending on how you define sustainability, but more sustainability information in there. Now, then obviously integrated reporting was a big push in that. And so companies went from having perhaps had this other report called sustainability report that was sort of developing, becoming more and more sophisticated, saying, oh, well, actually, we need to be doing integrated reporting. So they stopped doing the sustainability report and started doing an integrated report, which meant loads of sustainability information got into the annual report. In the UK, however, there's also a focus around conciseness. The FRC has always talked about the conciseness of documents, clear and concise, whereas continental Europe, for instance, that term clear and concise is actually clear and comprehensive. So when you compare annual reports in continental Europe versus annual reports in the UK, they're much longer in continental Europe, and therefore there's more scope to have a lot of sustainability information in there. Whereas, it's difficult. We sometimes have clients saying we want to talk much more about sustainability annual reports, but we want to have 2 pages shorter annual report than last year, and that's not going to happen, right? I think the annual report can't cover everything. It just isn't possible for it to be balanced, talking about what is most material, and contain all of your information from a sustainability perspective. So it's good at telling the condensed, integrated story of how things fit together. It's not good for the detail. And that's where you need other formats, such as sustainability report or some of the other formats we'll go through in a minute. And likewise with the sustainability report, that's also gone through a substantial development over a number of years. Where sustainability reports have, really grown. We sort of start out with maybe 25 pages, goes to 40, and then all of a sudden we got 160 pages. Trying to tell a story to all stakeholders at the same time. Those who want the communication, those who want the disclosure, those who want the, very granular level of detail, and all of that just makes it slightly unbalanced and slightly unwieldy, and can, come across a little bit as rambling or unfocused. So what we're seeing, and this sort of aligns quite well with what the FRC is talking about in terms of their network of reporting, is that companies tend to go to a stage where, obviously the website's key. They need to get to the website in order to even, get to any of the reports, whether it's the annual report, sustainability report. So that's sort of stage one. You need to have that. You need to have the annual report. You need to have sustainability report. Then the next stage is some companies go, well, actually, that sustainability report under 160 pages, too long. It doesn't work for us. So they then tend to split it out. It might be sustainability progress report. It might be sort of a data and policy supplement or a data book or something. So we've already split that story in a common story, in a disclosure story. Stage 3 is really that network of reports where all of a sudden we're trying to communicate to different stakeholders. Perhaps we apply different materiality lenses. We're trying to give them the level of detail they want in the format they wanted. And, the focus is really on the audience. So audience specific reports or, topic specific reports. Yeah. So here we have, it could be TCFD report for when that TCFD section, which started out as 2 pages, ends up being, 16 pages, and you can't really have it in the report anymore, but you don't want to lose the detail. That's when most companies then end up doing a more holistic climate report. You still got the data policy supplements, the progress reports. You then start looking at, actually, are we communicating well enough with our customers on these topics? If it is key for them in terms of RFPs, that might be quite helpful to have a separate document that actually talks about this. If you're dealing with governments, if you're dealing with, companies for whom sustainability, if you're a B2B and you deal with big retailer, for instance, that's going to be key for your competitiveness. Now, obviously, some of these formats, and we've sort of gone through some of them: annual report, sustainability report, comms, marketing doc for clients or communicating the story more holistically, data book, fact sheets, and an A to Z website depository. So one place where you have all of your disclosures, but easily accessible, perhaps doing through an A to Z where you can then open them up, explode them out, and see more on each topic. So as you can see here, we start out with a low level of detail, sort of a medium level of detail, and a high level of detail. And it sort of gives you an idea of the sort of the full condensed story. It's the annual report. The sustainability report, short comms, is the storytelling, the communication aspect, where you can really go to town on being more emotive feelings, as Sally would say here. And then the last bit is really focused around fact disclosure or fact-based disclosures. Now, remember this one, the top of the iceberg? I thought I'd just focus a little bit on some of the elements in here on how to deal with these. So, for instance, this one here, the first one, which is around, how to deal with the frameworks. And I think key to this is to know your investors. So what is it that your investors engage by? So, looking at your top 10 investors, looking at your most active investors, and identifying what are those topics that they are involved in. What initiatives are they involved in? What topics are they engaging on? Some of them have, particular focus on diversity. Some of them are particular focus on all sorts of different topics. Supply chain, whatever. And understanding that, and let that lead you a little bit in terms of which ones you focus on. Secondly, you need to prioritize. You can't do all of them. It's just not possible to do all of them. And so therefore the priority, let's not make perfection the enemy of good here. Choose some that you feel you can do well, and then plan for the future. Which ones will you be doing next? Because even if you have an investor who say you must disclose on Workforce Disclosure Initiative, if you don't have the resource to do it this year, if you can hold them off by saying we will be disclosing by 2023, and that should hold them off. Align with industry. Quite a lot of companies tend to say that we must be doing GRI, for instance, because everybody in our sector is doing GRI, and actually go back and look, because there's a lot of change happening in who's reporting against what. So make sure you map out who's doing what. So you can say that actually, well, they might have done so in the past, but currently this is what they're focusing on, because you will be compared to them. You will be looked at, what are they doing? Why are you not doing it? And that will be the first go-to for anyone engaging with you on this. And then the other one is around the effort versus sort of stakeholder appreciation. I mean, I mentioned GRI before, and it's not that I don't like GRI, I do. It's been around for a very long time, and it's been incredibly, incredibly helpful for a lot of companies, particularly initially. But I also think that it's sort of become part of most sustainability teams' DNA. They can't imagine not doing GRI. But if they start looking at who's doing it and who's not doing it, and how well are they doing it, and how is it being used? Is it actually being used? If you have a standalone GRI format, somewhere on your website, how many is actually downloading it to look at it? And is it something that you are merely using because you want to make sure that you have the disclosures in there, or are you doing it because you think someone's going to look at it? Because I would say the former is probably more helpful than the latter. Certainly from an investor perspective, GRI is not particularly useful. And I think you'll be surprised to see the sort of development in companies who've stopped doing it. Now, you'd say something like perhaps Dow Jones Sustainability Indices, filling in the questionnaire is incredibly time consuming. And that is, that's something where you'd say, is that really worth it? And I think there was a trend at one point where companies stopped doing it a little bit because it was just so time consuming. But now Standard & Poor's owns it, the format, which means all of the data from that goes into the Standard & Poor's credit rating as well. So those companies who do report on the CSA, so to the Dow Jones Sustainability Indices, will have an advantage in terms of that. Now, there are, as I said, developments in what you should be doing, and that can change again. But I think a really important one is the last one, is around mapping and tracking your disclosures. And that goes for rating agencies as well. Do you have a list of all the disclosures they require from you? Do you know where that disclosure sits so that someone doesn't inadvertently just delete it? If you have someone sitting on your website, some of it sitting in your sustainability report, some of it sitting in your annual report, some of it sitting in a supplementary document somewhere. And also for those points that you haven't currently covered, do you have a strategy for which ones you will be prioritizing next year and the year after and the year after to build on your disclosure? Secondly, actually here, primarily here, you need to be looking at your investors again. So which ones of the rankers and raters do they actually use? And this is information that can sometimes be difficult to find. But, as a general rule, most of them will use Sustainalytics, MSCI, and ISS. But as I said, there are reasons for also looking at Refinitiv and BE. A lot of this is publicly available. So your top line score is actually publicly available. You can go in and see how you score, how your competitors score, how somebody in a different sector scores for most of these. And that might play a role in whether you want to prioritize it or not. And I think that's something that most companies aren't necessarily aware of. Make it easy to find, really, really key. I think just about anyone on this call, I'm sure, have tried to have disclosures and not have anyone be able to find it. That, some of the raters will say, no, we didn't find that, so they don't have it. But obviously you have it. So you need to make it, and that's where the format comes into place, having a format where you have all of it in it. And finally, prioritize disclosures based on scoring. Not all disclosures are equal. Some disclosures will give you, will impact your score more than others. And obviously there is sometimes a link between how difficult it is to capture, because it'll be based on performance, or it'll be based on a strategy, etc. But there's not always a link between that. So identifying which disclosures will have the biggest impact from a scoring perspective, prioritizing those, figuring out what's going to be your next priority in the sort of medium term and in the long term.
And I know you've got some examples to go through, but just in the interest of time, maybe we could push through to Leighton and we could show the examples at the end.
Absolutely, yeah.
That would be great.
I'm sure we'll share this presentation as well. But what we just have is a couple of examples of somebody who's got a data sheet, somebody who's got an appendix, somebody who's got fact sheets for each of the material issues, and someone who's got a A to Z website depository. And that takes me to Leighton.
Okay, thanks. We could just move on another slide again. So, and one more. Okay, so storytelling of sustainability. I've put the word story in quotation marks because it's a bit cliched and a bit inappropriate, probably. Maybe positioning is more accurate. The sustainability story, however, is similarly communicated to the brand story. Effective communication follows much the same way brands are communicating their goods and services. We've built a bit of a house style at Black Sun because we think communication needs a bit of structure, as opposed to just developing a load of messaging and a load of narratives and just hoping they land. We like to try and bring a bit of hierarchy to it. So for us, we start with a sustainability narrative, and this is the immovable, unchangeable whole truth of what you do in terms of sustainability. It comprises your material issues and addresses those. Long form and short form versions will dial up the rhetoric and the positioning a little bit, but fundamentally your narrative does not change. A good sustainability narrative links to or even addresses the company's purpose and impact. It also should look at the corporate strategy and the business model to make it a really holistic, integrated part of the furniture of the business. The narrative then is underpinned by key messages, and the key messages are where it starts dialing up and down depending on the different channels or the different audiences that we talked about earlier. The job of the key message is to draw people in. It's to create a behavior change, create an opinion change, get someone doing something differently as a result of the message that you've brought them in with. So for that reason, they are usually quite punchy, they're quite pithy, they're quite engaging, but most importantly, they need to be supported by proof points. You need data, whether it's case studies, policies, or KPIs and targets. You cannot just, in the sustainability world, you cannot just make vague claims about being the #1 employer or being the most sustainable XYZ company without backing it up, because you'll get torn down. We see all the time companies get into a lot of trouble for over-promising and under-delivering. So a set of key messages then that is winning stakeholders over and bringing them in to learn more about you. You need to talk in a certain tone of voice, and sustainability communications are very different to brand communications in that, firstly, they can't be self-promoting. You can't be salesy in them. You are still having to give the macroeconomic situation and talk about your role in it. They also can't be greenwashy. So while they use a lot of the same styles, you need to talk in a way that is understandable to the audiences you're talking to. Also, you can't use the corporate speak. Depending what industry you're in, your corporate brand language might be very, very dry, crusty, and formal. That just doesn't work for sustainability. If you're trying to talk about deforestation and global unrest and inequality in the workplace, you can't then monologue people in a boring corporate tone. So you've got to be able to switch that tone of voice up. And then finally, we spend a lot of time working on how do you make that consistently applied across the businesses and big international companies who want to give their individual offices and factories the ability, and brands even, they want to give them the ability to talk about things in their own way, but they still have to be on brand and use the same company language. So we work an awful lot on trying to standardize this sustainability story and get people talking in a consistent but impactful and effective way. So we sort of work with companies across this whole spectrum. It starts off with a lot of desk research, a lot of discovery, trying to understand who the audiences are, like any brand or marketing project, right through to the development of these narratives, the development of the key messaging, understanding how they're going to be effective, measuring the effectiveness of the key messaging to see that if the company is winning, is getting the message over, is creating the behavior or perception change that they're seeking, and then just making sure that the ultimate stakeholders are being approached in the right way, and that they are finding the company to be on brand with its sustainability messaging. So that's typically what we mean by a sustainability story. As I say, not different to another brand story, but just told in a slightly different way. On the next slide, please. So what makes communication successful, specifically what makes sustainability communication successful, where perhaps you have a little bit more license when you're talking about your cans of soda or your burgers, whatever it is, you can talk a bit more openly. With sustainability, you're a bit more regimented in what you have to do. I won't go through all these, but some of those that we're finding at the moment to be really important to our clients are the importance of consistency, that what you say in one place has to be consistently said in the other, not just the numbers, but also the way you're telling it and the way you're positioning yourself. You have to be consistent in your social media, in your annual report, and what you're putting in your CDP submissions, for example. Being impactful is really important. Everybody's talking about being the most sustainable X, Y, Z, and sustainability is the heart of everything we do, and we lead through sustainability. But you have to be able to rise above that and actually talk in a bespoke way about what differentiates you and what you're doing and what your real world impact is, as opposed to the technicalities of your business model and your processes. Anne talked about being concise earlier. People are time poor. Younger people particularly are lazy, if I'm being unkind, but time poor perhaps. They will not read 100-page sustainability reports. In fact, they won't even go and find them. It's contingent on you to access them, to reach out to them, to be active in getting information into them. Provable and accurate is really important as well in sustainability. We're seeing all the time. I mean, Brewdog last week, corporate scandals all the time, or corporate exposures all the time, where people are making claims that aren't backed up. They are not who they seem to be when you actually drill down into it all. And then I suppose the last thing is really this audience relevant. The number of audiences, as I showed in an earlier slide, is so varied, so vast, and changes so frequently. It's so important you create the messages and the content you're putting out there to every different audience to realize younger generations are using social digital channels. There are still people reading reports. There are still people who want the fact sheets, but making sure you get the right balance of messaging across those different channels is increasingly important. So really, there's a lot of things you have to consider in your sustainability story in order for it to be successful. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to pick some examples. A couple of these are a bit predictable, but Patagonia, they do a great job. I mean, they're reputed as being a very sustainable company, but they do a great job of their messaging and positioning. They put themselves, it's kind of the us against the world. Dear consumer, customer, it's us against the world. We're ambassadors of sustainability. We hold ourselves to the same high standards we expect others to work to. And they position themselves in this way, and it works very effectively. Talking to a client who competes with them, saying these guys are just mopping up in the market, and their messaging and positioning is a big part of it. So that's what I like about these guys, just the way they position themselves and they bring people on board. And the next example, Mondi do a really great job at tying it all together. They've created this sustainable by design mantra, sort of strategic principle that they then use in everything they do to talk about how they're sustainable by design across their material issues, how they do it through their processes, how they're part of the green economy and the circular economy. But they also then use that through proof points. They talk about their ratings agencies, they produce numbers around it, they produce film and other collateral. For me, Mondi's a really good example of a company that's set out a narrative around sustainable by design and then works it through and keeps it consistent and keeps it engaging. And then almost the most predictable of all is the Unilever story. They're always cited as being excellent in sustainability. But what I'm focusing on here really is their socialization, the way that they use social media to deliver their sustainability story. I often remark that for many companies, sustainability in their comms and their marcoms channels is as important as the brand itself. If you go to Unilever and Reckitt and P&G and some of these companies, you'll find more in their social media about climate change, deforestation, social injustice than you will about their products, goods, services, acquisitions, dividend payments. Really, for a lot of companies, they're making sustainability the thing they lead on in their comms. And the example on screen here with Unilever is them doing exactly that. In all of their social media channels, they're really active, they're always updating it, and they're really showing how they are about people and the planet, almost far beyond profit. So that's what I like about Unilever. So a few examples there of things that I think are done really well. Just move on a slide, please. So back to our original question where we talked about disclosure or communication. I hope what Anne and I have laid out really, and perhaps unfortunately is just on a slide, is that it isn't really an or question, it's an and question. Sustainability disclosure and sustainability communication are equally as important as one another, and companies who are going to win the race in this and actually going to differentiate themselves through sustainability need to be doing both. So just a brief summary again before we end on what they are. The disclosure really is about mandatory or optimized reporting that has a benefit to you through your stakeholders. It's about data, numbers, getting information out in a timely way that machine readers and people who just want the hard facts can get to. PDF and Excel still the common ways of sharing this information. And then communication is almost the opposite. It's the grand storytelling, the narrative, the positioning, the differentiation, what makes you great, and the proactive ways you reach people, notifying them through their social media, engaging them with film and moving image and infographics, and almost bringing it into the brand, making it part of your corporate identity so that sustainability and the business are synonymous and the communication is pushing that message home. So that's a little bit about how we view the world and the kind of the two buckets of personas and audiences that we've come up with. So I guess we'll end there and open up to any questions.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions that I've had come in. First question, I mean, guys, really good overview and a lot to take in for everybody. And Leighton and Anne, you showed some really good examples of some leading companies out there. So one of the questions is really, what's your advice to companies that don't have big budgets or a lot of resource to do this? Because as we know well from working with clients, reporting often isn't anybody's day job particularly. I don't know if this is somebody's day job, what Leighton you're talking about, but maybe each of you could give your advice to companies that, you know, want to get along on this journey, but perhaps don't have the big budgets or the resource in place. Anne, do you want to kick off?
I think I would say prioritize and strategize, is going to be key here. I mean, I know, again, comparing to continental Europe, the UK companies tend to have a smaller team dealing with this. Maybe there's scope here to share the burden. We talked a little bit about some of the other teams who should also be involved in this disclosure exercise. Having perhaps setting up that cross-functional working group and figuring out exactly how are you going to prioritize, what are those parameters that are important for how you prioritize, then do the prioritization for the short term, the medium term, and the long term. And don't do as an unnamed client did for a very long time, which was hit delete. That was the sort of saving mechanism for when the rankers and raters reports came in, because I didn't have the resources to deal with it. Even if it means that you look at it and say, okay, this year we're going to try and put in place some measures to disclose these 6 elements that will make a massive impact have a impact from a sort of scoring perspective, then do that. That's at least an active choice and something that's achievable.
And from my perspective, I think is if you're going to only do one thing, be honest, be transparent. Don't try and greenwash. Don't try and bullshit. It's not only for the sake of getting caught, but also the investors I speak to actually appreciate companies who are at the start of a journey. They appreciate that not everyone's got all the answers, that people don't have huge budgets. Often they own companies. They're quite glad people aren't spending millions and millions, on great storytelling. But just make sure the one thing you stand for is transparency, honesty, authenticity, because you can never, ever get caught out. And you'll actually find the investors are pretty appreciative of it as well.
Super. I think that's really helpful. And the other thing I would add is I would say get it onto the boardroom agenda, because I think this is really important to get the endorsement and hopefully more resource and budgeting for that. Okay, lucky last then, just we've got a couple more minutes just with what's next. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on that we need to be thinking about into the future? The landscape's changing very dramatically, but is there anything else that's on the horizon that we want people to be thinking about?
I guess for me, it's around assurance process. It's the the legislation that's being drafted in Europe around making the assurance process mandatory for sustainability data. A lot of companies choose to do assurance. So people on the call, if there'll be many familiar with the assurance process, those that aren't, it should know it's a real pain. It's very expensive, very a painful process internally to deal with. The mutterings from this new EU legislation are it will become mandatory. So I think if anyone's got anything on their radar, it's to watch out for that and start thinking now about understanding the assurance process and the ramifications that could have on your business if it becomes mandatory.
Super. And Anne, did you want to add?
For me, it's about the EU taxonomy and the sort of requirements to be disclosing sort of green revenues, because I think a lot of companies are, some are there, but I think the vast majority are not there at all. And those deadlines are really looming in the not very long, in the quite short term.
Okay, fantastic. Well, great session, guys. I just wanted to bring it to a close because it is 10:30. I'm sorry if I didn't get to everybody's questions. If you've got any, please send them in. I know we'll be circulating the deck. And looking forward to catching up with you all soon. Just lucky last, we have an event next week with the Value Reporting Foundation and the AICPA, where we launch our Purpose Drives Profit research, which is a really exciting study on the C-suite's view of purpose and profit and the changing value of value creation. So I encourage you all to join up for that. And as well, we'll be hosting again our FRC annual event in September, along with some follow-up events for our Web 100 research. So please watch this space. Look forward to seeing you all in person sometime. Everybody enjoy a safe and happy and healthy summer. And if you get away, good bloody luck. I know it's not that easy. So take care and we'll speak to you soon. Thanks very much, everybody.